I remember the moment I stepped into that ballroom, my heart pounding with a mix of pride and exhaustion that had carried me through 65 years of living. My name is Evelyn Carter, and I raised my only son, Michael, with nothing but my hands, a sewing machine, and the stubborn belief that love would be enough. That night was supposed to be the reward for every sleepless shift, every meal skipped, every aching bone I ignored. It was his wedding day, and I thought I had finally arrived at a place where sacrifice would be seen, where devotion would matter. The room glittered with chandeliers, the smell of champagne hung in the air, and violins swelled like it was a fairy tale. I stood near the front, waiting for someone to guide me to my seat. That's when Marina, my new daughter-in-law, floated over in her lace gown, her smile sharp enough to cut. She leaned close and whispered, "Mrs. Carter, we thought you'd be more comfortable over here." Her manicured finger pointed toward a lonely chair pressed against the wall beside the restrooms. "The family pictures will look fresher if it's just the younger group up front. You understand, don't you?" For a second, I didn't breathe. The sound of laughter from the bridal party blurred, and my chest tightened as if the air had been stolen. A lifetime of swallowing pride rose like a bitter taste in my throat. My own son stood a few feet away, his eyes shifting to the floor, saying nothing. The violin strings carried on, but inside me, something snapped. Quiet, invisible to everyone else, but final. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. With steady hands, I pushed back the chair she had offered and walked across the ballroom. The clicking of my low heels on the marble floor seemed louder than the music. Guests turned their heads, confused, curious. I reached the long table stacked high with glittering, wrapped gifts, each bow carefully arranged for photographs. My gift sat there too, a heavy box wrapped in ivory paper and tied with a silk ribbon I had chosen myself. Without a word, I picked it up, pressed it against my chest, and turned toward the exit. The doors swung closed behind me, muffling the celebration I had just abandoned. No one followed. No one stopped me. And in that silence, I realized the night was no longer about loss. It was about reclaiming something I had given away too freely. My dignity. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside, clutching the gift box against my chest. The laughter and music behind those doors dissolved into a faint hum, leaving only the sound of my own breath and the echo of shoes striking pavement. For a moment I stood frozen, my hands trembling not from weakness but from a surge of clarity. The humiliation I had just endured pressed hard against the years that came before, and memory pulled me backward, to where it all began. I was never a woman of luxury. My hands learned to stitch leather before they ever held anything delicate. Spokane was not an easy city for a young mother to carve out a life, but I had no choice. Michael's father walked away before his first birthday, leaving me with an infant and a pile of unpaid bills. I found work at a garage, patching car seats and reupholstering interiors, the smell of glue and vinyl following me home every night. Later, when the garage slowed down, I opened a thrift shop on a corner street, a place where cast-off coats and worn shoes found a second chance. Those years etched themselves onto my body. My shoulders ached from hauling boxes. My fingertips bore the marks of needles and fabric staples. Yet every scar felt justified each time I looked at Michael's face, his school projects taped to the refrigerator, his laughter echoing down our small hallway. He was the reason I pushed through fatigue, the reason I taught myself never to cry in front of him, no matter how empty the pantry was. But as I stood outside the wedding hall with that box, I realized sacrifice alone had never been enough to shield me. Respect had to be claimed, not begged for. That realization burned brighter than the ballroom lights I had just walked away from. Michael became the axis around which my world spun. From the moment he could walk, I measured every decision against his needs. If there was only enough money for one pair of shoes, he wore them. If there was only one portion of meat at dinner, he ate it while I pretended I wasn't hungry. Those small choices piled up, year after year, until they built the shape of my entire life. I remember the winters most vividly. Spokane winters are sharp, the kind that make your lungs sting when you breathe. I would leave the thrift shop after closing, my hands cracked and raw from sorting donations, and carry home a bag of discounted groceries. Sometimes Michael would already be asleep on the couch, school books scattered around him, the faint hum of the heater struggling against the cold. I would tuck a blanket over his shoulders and whisper to myself that tomorrow I would work harder, sell more, stretch every dollar further. There were moments of tenderness that balanced the hardship. Michael loved to help in the shop, stacking books, trying on oversized jackets, laughing at how the sleeves swallowed his arms. On Saturdays, we'd share a milkshake at the corner diner, our small ritual of celebration when the week's bills had been paid. His joy was the fuel that kept me moving forward, even when exhaustion pressed so heavy I could barely stand. Yet beneath the warmth, a quiet fear always lived inside me, that all my sacrifices might not be enough to protect him from the hunger, the judgment, the feeling of being less than. I carried that fear silently, believing that a mother's role was to shield, even at the cost of herself. Standing outside his wedding now, that old fear stirred again, but this time it no longer felt like duty. It felt like a warning that something in our bond had fractured. 15 years earlier, long before tuxedos and chandeliers, I sat at my kitchen table staring at a man who looked more defeated than I had ever seen. His name was Daniel Brooks, a friend from years back who had once fixed my old Chevy when I couldn't afford a proper mechanic. Time had not been kind to him. His shirt hung loose on his shoulders, and his hands shook as he wrapped them around a mug of coffee I had brewed from the last scoop in the tin. "I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate, Evelyn," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've got this idea, renewable energy, a company that could really make a difference, but the banks won't touch me, and without $5,000, it dies before it starts." 5,000. To me, it might as well have been 50,000. My thrift shop barely broke even most months, and I had bills stacked like playing cards on the counter. Still, as I looked at Daniel's tired eyes, I remembered how he once refused payment when he fixed my car, telling me to save it for Michael's school supplies. Some debts are carried in the heart, not on paper. I walked into my bedroom, opened the small metal box I kept tucked beneath sweaters, and pulled out the envelope that held my emergency savings. It wasn't much, but it was everything I had scraped together over years of skipping vacations, birthdays, and small luxuries. I pressed it into his hand, feeling the weight of the decision settle in my bones. "Take it," I told him. "But promise me one thing, if this works, don't forget what it cost." The rain drummed against the window that night as I lay awake, wondering if I had just thrown away the only safety net Michael and I had. I couldn't know then that the choice would come back to me in ways I could never imagine. The phone call came just a week before the wedding. I was sitting in the thrift shop, sorting through a box of donated coats, when the old landline on the counter rang. A man introduced himself as an attorney from Portland, his voice calm but heavy with finality. "I'm sorry to inform you," he said, "that Mr. Daniel Brooks passed away last month. You were listed in his will." For a moment I thought he had the wrong person. Why would Daniel, who had gone on to build the very company he once described at my kitchen table, include me in his final affairs? The attorney went on, explaining that Daniel had never forgotten my loan, nor the trust I had placed in him when no one else would. As a gesture of gratitude, he had left me 500 preferred shares in his company. I nearly dropped the phone. 500 shares? I repeated, hardly able to grasp the meaning. Yes, the attorney confirmed. And after multiple splits and the company's growth, the valuation is now substantial. At current market value, your holding is worth just over $10 million. The world tilted. My knees pressed hard against the stool, and I gripped the counter to keep steady. 10 million? The numbers seemed unreal, like a cruel joke. But then came the part that undid me. The attorney had also been asked to deliver a handwritten letter. When the envelope arrived the next day, I opened it slowly. Daniel's familiar scrawl filled the page. Evelyn, you once gave me freedom when you had none to spare. I can't repay the years you carried alone, but I can give you a choice. Use this gift to free yourself. Choose your own life now. I folded the letter against my chest and cried in the quiet shop, surrounded by shelves of second-hand goods. For the first time in decades, possibility felt heavier than burden. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I allowed myself a dangerous indulgence, hope. With Daniel's legacy in my hands, I imagined giving Michael and Marina a start so secure that they would never taste the kind of scarcity I had endured. I wanted to believe that my years of sacrifice had finally bloomed into something tangible for him, something that said, "You are safe now, and you owe no one but love in return." So I went to a lawyer and had the paperwork drawn up. The gift was more than money. It was a future. Inside the heavy ivory box I carried that night was a deed to a small cottage on the Oregon coast, its shingles weathered but sturdy, its windows facing the endless sea. Alongside it, folded neatly in an envelope, was a cashier's check for $1.5 million, a nest egg meant to cover their new beginning. I tied it all with a silk ribbon, careful to make it look elegant but understated. As I wrapped the box, I thought about how Michael's eyes would shine when he saw it, how Marina might soften when she realized she had married into not just love, but security. I pictured myself, for once, not the woman in the shadows, but the mother whose gift spoke louder than years of worn hands and patched shoes, but standing there at the wedding, pointed toward a chair by the restroom wall. I felt the ribbon unravel in my mind. Every scrap of respect I had longed for was reduced to a decorative afterthought that night. When I lifted the box from the gift table and pressed it to my chest, I knew it no longer belonged to them. It belonged to me, to the part of me that refused to be erased. The morning after the wedding, the newlyweds hosted a small gathering in the hotel lounge to open gifts. The room smelled of coffee and sugared pastries, sunlight pouring through tall windows as laughter filled the space. Boxes were unwrapped, bows tossed aside, and polite thank yous exchanged. I sat quietly near the edge, my box resting on my lap, smaller than the rest. When Michael finally turned to me, there was a hesitation in his voice. "Mom, yours?" His hand lingered in the air, waiting. Marina leaned closer, her smile polite but strained, as if bracing for some inconvenience. I rose and carried the box to the center table. Unlike the bright packages around it, mine was plain, wrapped in brown paper with a simple string. I wanted no one distracted by shine. My fingers tugged the knot loose, and inside was only a key attached to a tag with an address written in my own handwriting, a modest apartment in Tacoma. Confusion flickered across Michael's face. Marina tilted her head, clearly underwhelmed, but before they could speak, I did. "This is my new home," I said, steady and calm. "It's the first gift I've given myself in decades, And it means I'll no longer live in the background of someone else's picture. I'll be living on my own terms now. The room went silent. Paper crinkled underfoot as if the air itself had frozen. I slipped the key back into my palm and tucked the string back into the box, as though sealing my declaration inside it. I didn't need applause or gratitude. The statement had been made. The wedding gifts were for their future. My box was for mine. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't in years. Freedom that didn't need anyone's permission. The cottage at Cannon Beach was small, nothing like the glossy homes in magazines, but it felt like it had been waiting for me all along. Its cedar shingles carried the scent of salt, and the porch creaked under my weight as I stepped into a space that was mine alone. From the living room window, the ocean stretched wide, restless and eternal, the kind of view that dared you to breathe deeper. Those first mornings, I woke to the sound of waves striking the shore, gulls crying overhead. Instead of rushing to unlock the thrift shop or chase overdue bills, I brewed coffee slowly, letting the steam curl into the air. I carried the mug outside and stood barefoot on the porch, the cool wood grounding me as the tide rolled in and out. For the first time in decades, silence wasn't a reminder of loneliness. It was a balm. I filled my days with small rituals that stitched me back together. I planted wildflowers in the yard, their roots tangling with the seagrass. I walked the shoreline at dusk, collecting driftwood and shells like souvenirs from a new chapter. Neighbors waved as they passed, their dogs tugging at leashes, their smiles unburdened by old grudges. I found comfort in the ordinary rhythm of it all. Yet healing wasn't just about quiet beauty. It was also about reckoning. Each evening, as the sky turned shades of orange and violet, I thought about Michael, his silence at the wedding, his part in my humiliation. My love for him remained, but so did the raw ache. That tension sat inside me like the tide's pull, demanding that one day we face it together. For now, though, the ocean reminded me of something simple. I had survived, and survival had finally given way to living. It was late afternoon when I heard the knock. The sun had begun its slow descent, painting the ocean in bands of gold and copper. I opened the door to find Michael standing on the porch, his shoulders slumped, his tie loosened as if he had rushed straight from work. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, the sound of the waves filling the silence between us. "Mom," he finally said, his voice rough. "I should have stopped her. I should have spoken up." His eyes brimmed with something I hadn't seen in years. Shame. I stepped aside, letting him in. He sat at the small kitchen table, the same one where I had been writing letters I never sent. He folded his hands, fidgeting as though he were a boy again, waiting for discipline. "I don't know why I froze," he admitted. "I saw how she treated you, and I did nothing. I thought keeping the peace was love, but it wasn't. It was cowardice." His confession struck me, but I knew words alone weren't enough. I poured 2 mugs of tea and set one before him. "Michael," I said carefully, "love without respect is emptiness. If you want to repair what's broken between us, it won't be with apologies. It will be with actions." He nodded, eyes fixed on the table. "What do I need to do?" "You'll need to sit with a counselor," I told him. "Unpack why silence feels safer than truth. You'll need to build your own stability instead of leaning on others to clean the mess. And you'll need to show me, not just say, that you understand my worth." Michael swallowed hard, then whispered, "I'll do it." For the first time since the wedding, I believed he meant it. It was a gray morning when Marina appeared at my door. She stood there in a wool coat, her hands twisting the strap of her purse, eyes darting toward the sea as if searching for courage. I invited her in, the kettle already warm on the stove. She sat stiffly at the edge of the couch, her perfume faint but familiar from the wedding night. "I owe you an apology," she began, her voice hesitant. "I should never have spoken to you the way I did. I was trying to create an image, to make everything look perfect. And She stopped, pressing her lips together. "I disrespected you, and I regret it." I studied her face, searching for sincerity. She was young, still learning what it meant to carry more than her own reflection. "Regret is a start," I said, pouring tea into 2 cups. "But respect is not words. It's a practice." Her eyes lifted. "What do you mean?" "It means showing up differently," I replied. "If you want forgiveness, prove it through action. Volunteer where people's worth isn't measured by appearances. Speak kindly, even when no one is watching. And when you look at me or anyone older, see more than gray hair. See a life carried in these lines." She nodded slowly, tears catching in the corners of her eyes. "I can try." "Then that's all I'll ask for now," I said gently. "Because forgiveness isn't a gift I hand over once. It's a door that opens only when respect walks through first." We sat in silence, the ocean wind rattling the windows. Marina sipped her tea, and for the first time I saw not defiance, but humility. As I closed the door behind her later, I whispered to myself, respect is the doorway to freedom. And in that truth, I felt lighter than the tide itself. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.